everyone, this is Evelyn Goodman from BrainyHeart from Shanghai. I have a very interesting guest today on board, Ricardo Krug, an amazing entrepreneur who just hit the road a couple years ago to Shanghai, and he set up his own company. What is he doing? Well, he is in the educational industry, and he's going to tell more about how he does what he does to us in a couple of minutes. An amazing personality, as said, with 4 languages. Well, enjoy the interview. Hi there, Ricardo. Welcome to BrainyHeart. Before we shoot off with the questions, I'd like to ask you, who are you and what do you do?
So hi Evelyn, hi to everyone who's watching, who's listening. BrainyHeart, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm really thankful for the invite. And well, first of all, as you said, my name is Ricardo Krug. I am from Brazil, where I own an educational company. We have an educational startup. We focus mainly on criminal law and criminology. This is our niche, our market niche. But what we saw was an opportunity to develop learning through online means, but in a different manner, not as people usually make it, just basically someone being recorded doing a presential class. I think that there is potential for you to create both an interactive and immersive world in which every student, everyone who's interested in the things we talk about, in our niche specifically criminal law and criminology, but this is absolutely something that can be expanded to every other area of knowledge. To make this content, to make the content that we make in a manner that is almost bingeable. You know how people watch Netflix, for instance, for hours and hours and hours? Our idea is to think of ways on how academic knowledge, on how something not necessarily shallow, something which can be fruitful from the community when it comes to research, when it comes to when it comes to critical thought in general, how could we make this type of content, design it and develop it in a way that it's entertaining as much as something that we spend like hours and hours and hours of our lives into. That's basically what we do. That's the initiative is called Introcrim, so Introduction to Criminology. We have a YouTube channel, youtube.com/Introcrim. We're also on Facebook and Instagram. Also, just search Introcrim, you're going to be able to find us there.
Excellent. What is your background? Did you have something to do with criminology?
Yes, I did. I actually studied law back in Brazil, and I have a couple of postgraduate degrees on that area. First one within criminology and criminal law from a highly specialized institute back in Brazil. The second one on managerial accounting, since I do a lot of work within white-collar crime. That's actually my main area of focus research-wise. I'm currently pursuing a master's degree in criminology at the University of São Paulo, which is the most prestigious university in Latin America, one of the top 50 also in the world. And I also did a little stint back in Columbia University in the city of New York, where I had the pleasure of studying a number of things related to criminology for a whole summer. It was amazing. That's basically my background academically wise.
And why Shanghai? When did you move here?
I actually came to Shanghai 5 months ago. The idea of Shanghai came, as most things in doing life, through a friend. He has been living here for 6 years now, and while discussing, he's a really good friend of mine, while discussing like business opportunities and how we could expand business models and where the places to be were, especially after I lived in New York, he just said, you gotta come to Shanghai. You gotta come to Shanghai. And he has been saying that for years and years and years. Here's the thing, as a Westerner, you look at it and you think, okay, that might be interesting, it's kind of a big town and everything, but yeah, I mean, eventually I'll go, right? And then I had actually a spot in my schedule, let's just put it like this, until I started with my future classes at the master's degree in the University of Sao Paulo on August, and I said, you know what, let's try this on. Let's go to Shanghai and see what I could learn from being in such place. And ever since, it's been a marvelous journey just to be here and just to try and reach and grab and immerse myself in everything that this amazing city has to offer.
Great. So let's just get down to the questions that I usually ask. What do you think? I mean, what have you observed so far in China? How they are different than European mindset?
Okay, this is an interesting question because I think multiple answers could be given to it.
Feel free.
So there are many differences between Western cultures in general and the Chinese culture. I'd say business-wise, the one that strikes me as the most interesting, in a way stark difference, is the sheer velocity out of everything here. I mean, the speed of things happening is just incomparable to anywhere else in the world. I mean, studying white-collar crime, I'm used to dealing with people who work on trade markets, people who are really need to be online every day and thinking about things and discussing and planning and looking at it at real time every time, which is something that would give you the impression, okay, this is as far as it goes, right? But China is completely different. Everything that you're doing, there's at least 10 more people doing it. If you're doing something like general, then there's going to be hundreds, thousands of people doing the exact same thing. And the speed of things, how everything works, how everything is pursued in basically an unapologetic manner, is something that I did not find anywhere else in the West. I'm counting here Europe, I'm counting Latin America, I'm counting the Americas in general, the United States, and there's nothing that compares to China when it comes to the speed of things being done.
I mean, what I observed as well, having, I would like to hear your opinion on this, is in Europe or in European cultures, we try to create a unique selling proposition when we have a company or when we set up a company, right? So we would like to be different. So then you can't just basically do exactly the same like Amazon does. So you just want to try to get a kind of niche and you want to be different than the other ones. Here, they don't have a problem to do exactly the same because the market is so large, I think, so that they say, like I can do exactly the same and I'm going to have my clients. Is that so?
That actually does make a lot of sense. I mean, we are thought to think of developing a new product, developing a new business line, and mostly in marketing terms, right? And there's a really good book. It's called the Immutable Laws of Marketing, and one of them is actually that it doesn't matter what you do, you just need to be the first one to do it, right? And if you can't, there's another one who says, if you're not the first at doing something, then you got to create your own niche and be the first one to do on that niche, on that specific business proposition, right? China is in itself completely different because when you're dealing with China, first of all, you gotta think this is a 1.5 billion people country. The internal markets in here are just, there's no way to compare it to any other reality in the world. But also, this is probably the biggest trader on earth. So it's not only the 1.6 billion people here, but also everyone else in the world. And there's this notion that, well, if you can produce whatever you want, if you can fight for price and if you can fight for quality. And then in this sense, I think that there are some distinctions between suppliers and people whom you do business with. They have like their own niches within speed, within technicality, and within quality in general that you can actually kind of classify them in. But in general, yeah, you can basically do exactly what your opponent is doing, and you could both be profitable, extremely profitable, depending on the niche where you're working.
Okay. what can we learn actually, like from what you observe so far, what can we learn in the Western world? Just shortly, so like, in a heartbeat, what can you say? What can we learn from them actually?
I would go with my first answer again, the speed. It's not leaving something for you to do tomorrow. You take it and you do it right now while you're in focus, because the velocity of things here is something that we need to take in and to adapt and say, okay, no, this is the way we got to work. If I want this, I'm just going to go, I'm just going to get. In a sense, it's the perfect example of the phrase, done is better than perfect. The whole concept of quality sometimes may be left behind when you do things in a hurry, but there's also a fairly good risk of people relying and waiting for something to be perfect. Oh, I want this to be perfect because it's going to be my product, it's going to be my idea, it's going to be, and it needs to be perfect. And while you're trying with perfect, which might in the end become an excuse for you not to actually do what you set your heart to, then someone else is going to do it. So it's not, I'm going to leave it for tomorrow. It's, I'm going to do it now. And if you do it now, if we can learn this from the Chinese, then it's more than anything we could ask for.
What you're saying is basically that they are actually fitter in Pareto principle, like 80-20, than we are.
What do you mean?
So namely, the Pareto principle basically says, like 80% is good, the last 20% is not grateful at all, right? Nobody thanks you when you just do a presentation. Oh, like your presentation was really great. All the letters were size 14 and, that everything was perfectly done. Nobody talks about that. The content is important. And I think they are good at concentrating to these. So 80-20 principle, Pareto.
Absolutely. The 80-20 principle applies definitely here in China, and coming from the educational side of things, this is something that I gotta constantly remind myself of, because we're always dealing, okay, how are we going to produce this in the best way? Oh, but this motion graphic right here, like this lower third is not right, oh, the light in the hair is not perfect, and like all of these minimal things. And when someone comes to me, they come to me for my knowledge, for what I have to say, not for how I look or how the production looks. Is it important? Yes, it is, but in a sense, that's going to make you stand apart from your competitors. But if you don't have content, it's worthless. So you should focus on the 80% definitely, and the 20% you can increase it. You can gradually make it better. That's, if we can learn that from the Chinese, we're done.
Okay. I mean, do you say that they've got a better approach on dealing with failure? Or are they also as picky as Europeans or Western world, that they basically say, okay, we also would like to avoid failure? How do you say that, or how do you observe that?
This is an interesting question. I never thought about the concept of failure here anymore. I wouldn't be able to say that, sociologically, to make a proper statement, but my perception is not that they deal better with failure, but in a sense that since they're used to so much speed, they usually think on the short term quite oftenly. So when you're thinking about the short term, if you actually fail at something, you didn't necessarily invest like all of your life into it. We Westerners might put much more heart on what we do, and we try to create this beautiful baby of ours. It's going to be great, and then we get too tangled with it, And what I feel from the Chinese is they actually are not that linked to what they necessarily do. I mean, they are really focused on what they do, but if it doesn't work, okay, no, there's always another project, there's always another thing that we can do, and you can just move on and move on and move on. I'm not sure how that fits related to failure. I think it's more of a matter of perspective towards opportunities. There's ample opportunity, and when you have ample opportunity, failure might not be that much of a burden. From an entrepreneurial standpoint, at least.
Excellent. You actually, mentioned, or your perception is brilliant in this case. Next question I have to you is there a one size fit for success?
Good questions, huh? Good questions, Evelyn. Well, when you think about success, you're thinking you might be thinking at something at the end of a road, right? To have success at something, it's actually to achieve something specific, a goal, right? And if you're thinking about a one-size-fits-all concept towards success, then, well, it kind of implies that there is kind of a consensus on what the appropriate goals are, right? And I don't know, in this case, I think we could look at this situation in two different manners. I mean, subjectively, if you look at the change that society in general has at least Western society, has undertaken from the shift from modernity to this post-modern world that we're living in, the community has given place to the individual, and everything in itself has become tailored to the individual. You hear a lot of phrases like, oh, you got to provide an experience to your customer, it needs to be like custom made and everything. So the individual is kind of the center of everything, and when you focus that much on the individual, then you need to start accepting that individuals are inherently different. You start embracing difference, and when you embrace that much difference, it's actually kind of difficult for you to say, okay, this is like there is actually a consensus on what the goals of a society are. This subjectively, but on the other hand, I'm also thinking that there are some goals which you could objectively pinpoint and say, okay, these goals are actually shared by a majority of people in the world. If you look at, I mean, people are, in a sense, limited and constrained by the material conditions under which they live in, right? If they are so, then there's an actual limit on what people can do, and what people can think, what people can realize, what people can achieve. There's no opportunity for everyone. There are limitations for different kinds of people. In this sense, I mean, and if we look back to the question that, okay, the whole of society is now based on the individual, it is, but it may not always be based on the individual as an individual on himself, on herself. I'd wager it's looking more, especially from a business side, on the individual as a potential consumer. So in a sense, I would, if I could be bold enough to generalize this much, I would say that objectively, one could pinpoint success being relatively linked to the idea, not necessarily of wealth, but of the concrete possibility of consumption of products, of services, of experiences in itself. So subjectively, I would say, yeah, it kind of changes for everyone, but at the same time, objectively, I'd say we are kind of limited on what we can think and what we can do and what we can strive to achieve, because like society kind of puts this pressure on us that we need to perform in a specific manner, especially due to related to wealth and our capabilities of consuming stuff.
Excellent. What would you advise to a young person fresh from the high school or fresh graduate from the university, they would like to head to Brazil or Shanghai or Berlin, so what would you advise to those people? The wide world open.
If you have the opportunity, do it. I myself had the opportunity and the pleasure of living in Germany for 1 year. I've lived in New York already, now I've lived in Shanghai, and also changed cities a couple of times in Brazil, just searching for opportunities and building up your repertoire, you know? Because if we think at what life was 50 years ago, this much moving around, that wouldn't make sense, right? Because you'd had to have a steady job, you had to have like steady income, you had a whole career path ahead of you, and you kind of need to follow on these footsteps. Right now is already completely different, and it's going to be totally and completely different in the next 30 years. If you think about the next 30 years, I've read somewhere, I'm not going to be able to give you a source on this, I'll look it up later, but I've read somewhere that the 60% of the professions that we know now are going to be gone in 30 years.
Correct. So
in this sense, I would, if you have the opportunity, it's not everyone who does. I mean, if you gotta pay your bills, if you gotta work, I would say just stick to that, because this is the important thing, right? You got to have focus on whatever you need to do in order to get there. I would say, well, if you have the opportunity, though, just do it. Go to other places. Search for, like there are resources online for you to look up on scholarships, on trainee programs, on there is a multitude of resources available for you to try and live and think outside the box. If you don't have that possibility for whatever reason, the only thing I would say is take care of what you do in your free time. I mean, I would never suggest you to give up on leisure, on the things that give you pleasure, on all of these things, because everyone knows that working hard at anything can be really stressful. So you gotta have these things. But if you can find a passion, if you can find something to develop, to work in as a side project, as something that really makes your eyes shine. I mean, if you can find something that enchants you, dedicate your free time to that. Because then you might be able to produce something unique. You might be able to produce something which you never thought possible. You might be able to create something new. And if you have absolutely no chance, if you have if you gotta do the 9-to-5 job, or even worse in certain countries, in certain conditions, I would just say, keep on going. Keep on going, because opportunities may come along, and you need to be prepared for them.
Very well said. Thank you very much for this answer. We ask this question to everyone in BrainyHeart. What is more important for you, brain or the heart?
It's difficult, right? I don't think you can actually separate them both. I am feeling. Everything that I do with feeling. I do with passion, I do with love. Sometimes I also do it with hatred. It's also an emotion, right? But in a sense, I think it's all about balance. There's no point in being all emotions. There's no point in being all logic, because when you're dealing with people, you got to be able to deal with emotions. When you're dealing with data, you got to be able to think rationally. And if you can mix and match these two items, and there's no ready recipe for it, but if you can try and create something out of everything and analyze every situation as a unique one, then you can probably kind of mix and match them both. And if you can maintain a balance between them, between feeling, never forget to feel. I mean, I would definitely say don't turn into like a stone hard person and no, this is only data, this is how it goes, how the world moves. But also don't be just emotional and I want to do this, because sometimes you need to keep your feet to the ground. So yeah, I'd say the balance of them both, that's probably the best way to go.
Okay, so you just can't say heart or brain. Thank you very much.
No problem, it's been my pleasure. Thank you for the invite.
Ladies and gentlemen, this was an amazing interview with Ricardo Krug, a real millennial that impressed with his answers. As we can hear, as we heard wonderfully from him, that they would like to concentrate, the millennials would like to concentrate on not really entitlement that we also blame them most of the time for. They're willing to gain experience the wide world, where we concentrated, the millennials, Generation X, my generation, and baby boomers most of the time, that we concentrated in recent decades on the individualism. As soon as we're in the thinking hemisphere of the individual thinking or being individualist in a way, we are consuming, or we are actually operating on the left hemisphere, left cognitive mind. As soon as we'd like to be connected with the wide world and we'd like to see different things, we'd like to experience new things, we'd like to gain experience and make something out of it, we'd like to be connected, we operate in the right cognitive mind. And Ricardo was an excellent example of a millennial who has understood, truly understood, that it's not about individualism and it's not about being connected purely with the rest of the world. He just said, you know, as like a very experienced entrepreneur, it's all about mixing the both, right and left hemisphere, heart and brain, brain and heart. See you in the next interview and the Brainy Heart. All the best.